I'm delighted to have on the end of the line from the northern bastion of Cambridgeshire and Newcastle, Australia, Brett J. Gilbert and Matthew Dunstan, designers of the award-nominated Guild of Merchant Explorers. Gentlemen, welcome to my SDJ previews.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Nice to be here.
So to begin, you've been working together a long time, like a decade or so, on games with each other. Can you fill us in on how did you get together? How did you start working together, and why the relationship works so well? Brett, let's start with you.
Crikey. I mean, it all happened, 10 years is more than slightly over 10 years, I think now, isn't it? We first met at Essen but that was just at the beginning of my game design publishing journey. My game Divinari had been published the year before, I think. And I'd only gone to Essen for the first time the year before. And Matt had come to Cambridge, and we didn't meet originally in Cambridge. He just had spotted me online. I must have talked about Cambridge, and we met at Essen that year. But that was only the second time I'd ever been to Essen. So, like, the whole thing was still new to me. I was still meeting people in the UK in terms of other designers. So it was very, very early in my own kind of successful game design career.
And Matt, what made you think that Brett might be someone good to work with?
Well, I think Brett sort of undersold it a little bit. I mean, I always say I kind of stalked Brett online because he used to write an excellent blog. This is in 2011, and I think he had been writing it for maybe a year or two before that, with some really excellent articles, which I keep prodding Brett to somehow put them back on the internet somewhere, because I think they would actually stand up really well today. Anyway, I mean, and in a way, there wasn't as much being written about, game design even at that time. So back in Australia, I only started designing a year before, and I hadn't had anything, even finished a game really. And I read these things, and yes, I found out I was moving to Cambridge. I knew Brett was there somehow, and I think it was just that case. I mean, a lot of the case when people start in game design, it's you seek out a bit of a mentor, or at least somebody to not work with, but playtest with, to bounce off. And we were lucky to be able to do that. And we started just meeting once a week in a pub in Cambridge, and it sort of became a playtest group, which is actually still going in Cambridge. It's been going for 13 years odd now. I'm not a part of it anymore. Or I mean, I whenever I'm there, I try to attend. But I think it became a really strong sort of community, actually.
So yeah, let's talk a bit about that then, because I've spoken to a number of people, Trevor Benjamin, David Thompson. It seems that the Cambridge playtest group has, pound for pound, been one of the most successful sort of playtest groups in the UK. Did you start it, Brett, or was it some sort of just amorphous group of people that came together and you formalised something?
Well, no, it was just me and Matt. That was the beginning. After we returned from Essen, the time that we met, Matt proposed that we get together and playtest each other's games, and it literally was just the two of us in a pub in Cambridge. I think at that time I'd already met Rob Harris, who set up the Playtest UK kind of network, but even that was really recent. That was the year before, I think. And it took us a while before we actually put the two of us meeting onto the internet so that anybody else could find us. Initially, we met with Andrew Sheeran, who's another game designer. You may remember the game War on Terror, and his collaborator, his illustrator, Tom Morgan-Jones. They were based in Cambridge. I knew that. I found them on Twitter. So for a while, it was just the four of us would meet in the pub to play test each other's games. And it was, I don't know how long it took before we put it onto the meetup to become part of the Playtest UK sort of network. But once it did, then it pulled in all sorts of people, including Trevor and Dave Neal and David Thompson and a huge number of other people, actually, all of whom, it's still going strong. It obviously had a pause during the pandemic, but we're now back to twice monthly. And 3 weeks ago, there were like 12, 13 people there. It was fantastic.
So I need to ask you this, Brett, because I have spoken to Matt about this, I've spoken to Trevor about this, I've spoken to David about this, and apparently your critique style when playing someone else's prototype is quite legendary. Apparently you don't hold back. Well, how true is this, or are people exaggerating?
I'm not sure they're exaggerating, but Matt's just as bad. like I think often Matt and I were very much on the same page when we were reviewing stuff. I think I've certainly gained a reputation. I'm not denying it, but I think we realized. I mean, we were running. We kept meeting every week. We saw lots of games. Like we realized you had to be at least challenging to a design for it to move ahead. I don't. I like to think that I wasn't ever. I was constructive, and I think that's true. And I have maybe moderated my style slightly because the risk is you go in too hard too early, and that is, that crushes the kind of the spirit, perhaps, which is never the point. The point is to try and be constructive, but to be helpful and to push a design forward. And if you're going to bring it to a playtest session, then I think the whole point is to really kick its tires and see what people think and listen and receive feedback. And that is a tough skill to learn itself. And it's still hard sometimes to do that myself because lots of designers have lots of opinions. When you play test with designers, you get a lot of opinions, and you have to filter that through. I mean, hopefully I was doing people a service. Hopefully I was helping them with their game. I suppose you'd have to ask them.
So, Matt, you and Brett have worked together for a long time. So, firstly, what are some of the games you've designed together? And secondly, how have you managed to maintain a designing relationship over a decade?
Well, I mean, to the games like Elysium, which was also nominated for the Kennerspiel, like 9 years ago now, actually. Costa Rica, with Brett chime in if I'm just trying to remember good examples.
I'm looking at my
you're
shelf.
Looking at your shelf. Yeah.
Village Rails. Village Rails is a more recent one with Osprey, which is fun to work on. A smaller box game. There's a game called Spy Connection with Pegasus Spieler, which.
And we have Tree Society coming out with. Sorry, we have Tree Society coming out with Plan B at Gen Con.
Which I only yesterday received.
You got them? Oh,
I got them yesterday.
Oh, very exciting.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, absolutely lovely production, lovely box, lovely bits. So that's coming out very soon. So that's the most recent. But that is also one of the longest. I mean, the very first, it's finally being published in 2024. The very first email in the very long email chain that exists on my computer between me and Matt about that was in 2014.
Wow.
So that game has had a whole decade. That one game has spanned most of that period as it happens.
And speaking to why I think we've been able to work together I mean, it's like I imagine any sort of creative collaboration or even professional, working relationship. You have to. It is a bit about fit. Like it's something a little bit indescribable because I think both of us have enjoyed working with a lot of different designers, and we have done so in published games. But our collaboration still, I think, has been the most fruitful for both of us, and it's slowed down a little bit because I'm on the other side of the world, but. I'm hoping we'll keep making games together. And I think it's just that when you just have a very good fitting of styles and you have to overlap, it's like you have to have the right amount of overlap but the right amount of difference. Because if you're just exactly the same, then there's no point working together. You're not really adding anything to each other's designs or sensibilities or preferences. If you're too far apart, then you can't find any compromise, and the games don't move anywhere because you can't even agree on a common direction. So you sort of have to be in that kind of Goldilocks zone. And then you also having complementary skills just helps, I think, just finish a lot of things. I think part of the being kind of a professional game designer, so to speak, sure, there's an amount that, you have to kind of be good at the craft. But a lot of it is just there is such a broad range of skills that are needed to actually finish a game and actually pitch it to a publisher. And the more games you get to that point that you pitch, well, you've just got more chances of them being actually published. And I think Brett and I complement well each other. I'm very good at coming up with new ideas and sort of making the first prototype of an idea. Brett's very good at editing and rulebook writing, much underrated skill, and also sort of graphical design and layout and kind of iconography and things like this. So I think that's a good package that, leads to making a lot of games. And I think, it's been it's enjoyable. I think we still get along after all this time, which is also useful, I guess.
Yeah, you have to enjoy the process, but Matt alluded to the bit after that comes after actually making a game. is the work of pitching it and going to meetings and going to Essen and just turning up. And that would be exhausting on your own. I mean, we went to Essen year after year for like 6 or 7 years and had 20 plus meetings over 2 or 3 days. And it's just, that is hard work. And having on your own, it would be impossible, I think. So having two people in the room when you do that means you can, you can ebb and flow a little bit and you can build relationships with the publishers in, I don't know, in a slightly easier way, because it's a little bit more, it's not just you. You're not under the spotlight. So you can. I said, like, the very first time we went to Essen with a game, which was the year after we met. Something my MacBook is doing something weird. We had one game essentially that we just worked on. We had 13 pitches, I think, and we got really good at pitching that game because we had to do it back. I mean, we hadn't practiced, but by the end of it, it was really on point. Like I would talk it. I would have a little patter, and Matt would know when to bring the bits out of the bag and how to arrange stuff. Like, it was a real dance. I didn't get signed, by the way, but we did do a really good job of pitching it, and I think that, yeah, that was the beginning of just that. The benefit of having two people in the room like that was huge.
So, Matt, tell us about Guild of Merchant Explorers then. What was the origin of the game, and how was the development process of it?
It's funny, I was trying to prepare for this interview, and it has somewhat eluded me the kind of core, the kind of spark of the idea. I think and tell me if I'm wrong, Brett, I think I had probably the initial idea, but I think I was sort of obsessed with exploration games, and things like Kingdom. People have made comparisons to games like Kingdom Builder. I think I've been always interested in games where your influence kind of spreads over a map, and I think I was also quite obsessed with maps. I hadn't really done like a map game, and I think it was that kind of almost thematic urge to do something. And I think around that time is 2019. Roll and Rights had sort of all happened, and I think that kind of mechanism of what we now call flip and fill or whatever, flip and X, and it was probably just. I mean, it's a lot of game design for me. When I sort of think back to it, it's just the happy fortune of sort of a few different ideas coexisting in my head at the same time and sort of coalescing into a project. It's not like that for every game, but for something like this, it was, I was taking a bit from here, a bit from there, and really from the start, we had that flip and fill idea, that kind of reveal a card and everybody does things at the same time. We had that map, putting cubes on a map, and that really core thing of that connectedness, like starting from a point and moving out. So actually, it was kind of close at the start, which was quite exciting. It doesn't always happen that way. Of course, it took a long time, and I was actually looking back through the prototypes. We didn't. One of the mechanical things that a lot of people relied on, that we enjoy a lot too, is this idea of getting new powerful cards each round. And that wasn't in the game originally. There was an idea, I think almost like a deck building idea originally, but we didn't kind of nail the system as it is until, I don't know, I led at them, I think it was prototype J or something. But that whole process, it wasn't that long, actually. I think it was sort of 3 to 4 months, something like that, which is pretty quick, really. And I have a very clear memory of playtesting the game in Greece, of all places, which probably helps me remembering it, and just really enjoying it. I'm not saying that I hate all my games or something, but I think when you work on something, it doesn't, like, it's hard to disengage the kind of game designer fix-it brain. But I remember playing it and going like, actually, I'm really enjoying this, even in that process where the game isn't kind of done. And I think that was probably a good sign that it was, like there was something kind of special about it. And I even played the game barely 2 weeks ago, actually. No, before the nomination, we didn't know. And I was just like, wow, I really enjoyed that. It's not always this case that you have that kind of raw enjoyment of your own designs, which sounds a bit wrong maybe, but I don't know. Anyway, so that was it, and we pitched at Essen in 2019, and AEG signed it very quickly, actually. And we had the pleasure of working with Josh Wood from AEG, who was the developer on the game. He's designed games like Cat Lady and Japan. What's the Japan game called?
Let's go to Japan.
Let's go to Japan. Yes, thank you. I just look. And he's in Santa Monica, which I think is an underrated gem. I would, if you haven't played Santa Monica, I really recommend it. Anyway, he's fantastic, and I think he poured so much time and expertise into developing the game, really developing the maps, which is kind of, we had a few that were already kind of there, but we didn't have 6. And he really helped with that, and a lot of the kind of production and graphic design and sort of guiding all that. So actually, it was a collaborative process. We felt part of it certainly, but it was, again, it was a really good fit, and we had another person in Josh bringing a new skill set, and just playing it a bunch, which is really handy as well to kind of iron out all those 36 cards of different powers, making sure they're all interesting. And I think he did an amazing job, because you hear people say consistently when they finish the game, they feel like, oh, I had these 3 cards, they were amazing. They're like, how could this be balanced? And they look over at someone else's card. Like, that also seems really good. Like, so it's sort of, to manage that, I think, speaks to his dedication and work in developing the game.
So on that then, I guess we should talk a little bit about what the game is. So Brett, can you give us a sort of a précis of what Guild of Merchant Explorers is then?
I mean, it is a sort of flip and write made flesh, and you start with an empty map, and it's played over 4 eras, and in each era you get to explore a little bit, and the first era is shorter and it gets longer and longer, and you get more and more abilities. Essentially, there's one moment in each round where you get a fresh new card, and they're big cards, which then get activated then and in later rounds. And as you grow, you get to spider your way out. But at the end of each era, all of your explorers come home. So you know you're going to have to start again. But there is an opportunity within the system to build little villages, which gives you little jumping off points later on. So you can begin to explore. And the corners of the map feel a long way away at the beginning, but in the last round, often you can span the entire map. And all the while you're gaining coins, and you're completing little missions to get points, lots of little victories all the way along the way. But the biggest difference between that and the more traditional flip and write is this history, the idea that there is something can remain on the map when it's wiped clean, and give you another jumping off point. And that kind of cycle, new players get to see it really quickly because the first round's really short. And as soon as you get given one of these cards, you're like, oh wow, suddenly the world has opened up to me, and it's all in that growth and that acceleration. That's, I think, what people really love about it.
And so, it's been out in English for a while now, a couple of years. What was the initial reaction to the game on its initial printing, and were you happy about that, Matt?
Yeah, I think actually the reaction was really good. I think it came out sort of like 2022, tail end of 22, or maybe the start of 23. It was a bit in that kind of COVID, post-COVID sort of deluge of games. I think it got lost a little bit in that shuffle, but the reaction initially was really good. I remember a lot of reviewers, I can't remember many negative things about the gameplay actually, and I know it. I think it sold out reasonably quickly. I think there was a period where it wasn't available in the US for quite some time, which in some ways might have kind of hurt its kind of longevity, because once if the hype is there but you can't, and I mean it's not AG's fault. It's a perennial problem for publishers to try and solve how to meet demand in a timely fashion, and like post COVID, which is kind of crazy, like the logistics. So I think actually the reaction was really good, and you see that now. When people hear that it's been nominated, people sort of come out of the cobweb, from the shadows and sort of go like, oh, yeah, it's a bit of a hidden gem for them. They really feel like they're glad that it's getting kind of this second chance that people sort of know about it. Because maybe it kind of, not that it was not well received, but maybe a bit of a victim to just, there's just a lot of games these days.
And so, Brett, tell us about your Spiel des Jahres announcement morning. So, firstly, did you expect that Guild of Merchant Explorers would be nominated? And secondly, were you there with bated breath waiting for the announcement, or are you too cool to care about it?
No, I'm not too cool for that. I did actually watch the live stream of the announcement, which was quite a long, drawn-out affair. I mean, they wanted to make a meal of it. They had lots to talk about, mostly in German, of course. But And I didn't expect Guild. Actually, it was the first one that came up out of for the Kennerspiel thing. Another game of ours, Pray Another Day by Edition Spielweiser. I think we both secretly harboured maybe a hope that that could get a Spiel nod rather than a Kennerspiel nod.
I'm really annoyed because I've been saying for a year that is a guaranteed nomination for the Spiel des Jahres, and it wasn't. It wasn't even on the long list.
You were already there. You should have spoke louder for longer. And so when the first game that came up was not that, but was in Guild, it was like, oh, okay, well that's. I mean, maybe we're going to get 2 nominations. You know what I mean? But it was exciting, of course, because it's fantastic to get that recognition. Absolutely amazing, and it was a surprise. It was a surprise. So to be surprised like that, I'm not too cool for that. It was fun.
And Matt, you were obviously in Australia when the announcement was made. Were you awake? Or did you just wake up in the morning to text messages?
No, I'm not that cool. I did actually watch the live stream as well. It was like, I don't know what the time was, maybe midnight or something like that here, or 1 a.m. I mean, I have a five-month-old daughter at the moment, so sleep is, it's not necessarily that it's interrupting my sleep. And yeah, I mean, it's mirrored exactly what Brett was saying. That yeah, we had really thought Pray Another Day, and I should say this is not, not just us, but kind people like yourself and even the publisher. I think, of course, knowing that you can never predict it, but that sort of seen that. I think I had a very small inkling because I saw Harold Sharper's. Maybe I butchered his last name. Apologies. Had put a review, I think, on the website sometime late last year, and it seemed that he liked it through the translate. So I was like, oh, okay, at least it seems to be at least it was on the radar. But even so, it is a bit of a surprise for a game that, I think, as Brett described it well, it's just a very weird. Because I think I was really disappointed about Prey because I think we knew that first, or at least we knew it wasn't on the long list. So it was like, it's that weird sense of another year. I thought we had a chance, but and then just in the wake of that, getting the nomination. So it was sort of this really weird. And I walked in and talked to my wife, who was also up, and I sort of software, Pray Another Day didn't get nominated, and she was like, oh, okay, well, that's how it is. But I was like, oh, but we got nominated for Guild of Merchant Explorers, so it's a funny. It was a funny. It's a sort of a, what is it like? Can't argue with good fortune to sort of have these expectations and somehow be filled even when you sort of miss the mark at the first guess. So it was really nice. It was a really nice time. And we even texted each other, I think, around the time, in with the time zone. Yeah, it was a nice moment.
So Brett, I assume you've spoken with AEG post the nomination. What effect has the nomination had on the game? Has it revitalized it? Has it had a second life?
I think that's yet to be proven. It's too soon, I think. And I mean, I think until the award is actually announced. And if we were to win, of course, that would be a very different situation. I mean, without being too pessimistic, the Kennerspiel and the Spiel nominations do not have the same weight as each other. And a Spiel nomination obviously is fantastic, and a Spiel win would be incredible because that's what every publisher is chasing. The Kennerspiel is definitely second fiddle to the Spiel, and a nomination of the Spiel of the Kennerspiel isn't probably enough because, for example, Elysium was nominated for the Kennerspiel, and had it won, I think that would have pushed it forward, and it would have still have its life today, or perhaps it would have had a longer life for sure. But I don't think it's enough, unfortunately, just to be nominated. Of course, it's fantastic, and it gives it a longer life than it would have had, and puts in people's kind of minds. And maybe it means later it can have a rebirth. There can be a moment later when this game, any one of those games, can re-arrive, I suppose, and have a second wind. But I'm not, without taking anything away from the Kennerspiel jury. It's I don't think that nomination on its own is enough. So, and it has yet to be proven, I guess. So, fingers crossed, we shall see.
I mean, the only thing I would say to counter that slightly is I think, it's a bit different when, AEG is obviously a non-German publisher, a North American publisher. I think for Skellig, who is the German publisher of Guild Merchant Explorers. Like I think there will be an impact for them. I think they announced already that they've ordered a reprint. I'm not sure whether they had sort of, I don't know exactly the timing of that, but it might give it a bit more legs in Germany. I mean, yeah, it might not translate to over the kind of the English speaking world, and also I think the game being older kind of affects that a little bit as well. But definitely with Next Station last year, you see it in the sales figures. Like it's still a nomination, it has a big impact even if you don't win. But yeah, I think you just we sound a bit sort of old and jaded, but it's a really different. It's just it's tough to get a game to survive or to and especially to have a game sort of fall off and then come back is even less sort of likely. So I think we're obviously really appreciative of the recognition's amazing, but we're cautious whether we think it'll translate into huge sales.
And so I was with you, Matt, last year at the Spiel des Jahres award ceremony, and I was surprised at the grace that you showed in not winning. I'd have smashed the room up probably.
I mean, you're not going to get any more free food if you smash the room up. Yeah.
This is true.
I would have paid to see that.
So what are your expectations for the award? Do you expect to win? I mean, you're up against Matt Leacock, who is, a big name in games. I mean, what are your expectations?
Sure. So it's funny you mentioned that. I'm going to wait until I kind of get there. I remember last year sort of being a bit like, oh, who knows, maybe there's a chance. And the moment I got there, it was just obvious Dorfromatic would win, for instance, because you kind of get the sense of what's going on in the German world. And I'm not sure if the same will happen this time, where you'll get a very quick sort of reorientation because that it still is a German award and it still is kind of reflective of what I'm sure Ben you're much more plugged in that tonight. And it's interesting this year. I mean, interesting that certainly a Matthew will definitely win the Kennerspiel at least, which is good. But it's a funny year because the games I think are so different for the Kennerspiel. Like they kind of fit into different things you might want to recognize. I think our game is. Other people have said it. I'd agree. I think it's a bit like the safe choice in that it's probably the closest to what a traditional Kennerspiel would be, I guess, and it's not going to be so out of the realm of introducing it to German families in that realm, but. It's maybe not as daring as some of the other games. Obviously, Ticket to Ride Legacy is such an accomplishment, and obviously then there's a downside to that because it's a bigger, more expensive game. Maybe it's a bit more to ask of people. And then you have Daybreak or E-Mission, which I think is an incredible achievement for just being able to combine, mechanisms. Like it's really like the power of games to kind of deliver a message, if you will. Like it puts you in the thing. And to kind of feel it in regards to climate change. And we both know Matteo, who's the co-designer of Daybreak. And I think just the kind of achievement of being able to make that game and to make it fun and enjoyable, that's part of that. So it's sort of I think this year's kind of interesting because I think it's not like I don't think it's a comparative choice. I don't think you sort of go it's this game versus this game and this game pips this one. It's what do you want to recognize, I guess, what do you want the award to kind of represent? And I think for each of the games I think there's a strong argument and actually at that point I'm probably not that confident, but I think I'll be happy with whatever they choose because I don't think there's any choice you'd go oh that's ridiculous or I'd hope that I think the jury's I think actually they've made a good job of the three nominees is a good set. I mean I'll say that because I'm obviously part of it, but I think it's a good, a good sort of set of games to recognise, I think.
And so, Brett, Matthew is going to the award ceremony. He's travelling to Europe from Australia. You're currently sat in Cambridge, which is comparatively speaking.
I mean, it's down south. It's a long way, isn't it?
This is true. So, why have you decided not to attend the ceremony?
Well, I mean, some part of me doesn't want to, I suppose. Not because I'm not thankful for the nomination. It's just, I don't know. It's a tricky thing to be part of. I mean, because part of it is putting yourself out there, and you arrive, and Matt has more experience of this now than I do. And you're geared up for either the accolade or the disappointment, and both of those would be. I mean, they're both challenging. I guess. I don't know. I think I'm very happy. I am quite a homebody. Just fundamentally, I am a homebody. So I'm very happy. I will be very happy if the game wins. I'll be very happy. I won't be particularly surprised if it doesn't. I think. I mean, Matt has articulated it really well, actually, better than I would have done a good job. I think it is a really interesting set of three games. Sometimes people look at the lists and they go, oh, "What are they on? What are they on this year?" But I think they are different, and it's not an apples for apples thing. It's very much, well, you have to. There's a sort of, yeah, you can have a really strong opinion about which game should win, and they're all right, kind of thing. Um, and all of them will be perfectly strong choices. But fundamentally, games like culture and art is political. I mean, as they should be, they're political objects, and there is an aspect to the climate change game which I think is really strong. And if it only won for that reason, that would still be a good enough reason, because I think it is important that it exists. Um, and games aren't just about fun, not necessarily. They have other purposes, and they can represent other points of view, and that's all good. So I would be unsurprised if we lost. But I don't know. And I was surprised that it was nominated. So maybe it will surprise us again. I mean, and going back to the earlier point, I was actually I was genuinely surprised by how well received it was online. I mean, you always set out to make a good game, of course, and you want to make a game that you enjoy, and you want to put into it stuff that you like and make a good product. But you can never tell. It's a very crowded market, very fickle audience, and It seems to have been received much better than I would have anticipated in terms of like pinning a number like a BGG rating onto it. I would not have chosen 7 points. I think it's at 7.7 at the moment. It was at 7.8. To me, that's a pretty creditable achievement actually for a game in its class. So it clearly does have something in it more than perhaps I could have seen when it was beforehand. So who knows? Maybe the Germans will embrace it.
So just to wrap up, then you've given over your time to me quite charitably. So here is the part of the interview where you get to shamelessly plug what you've got coming up. So we'll start with Matthew, then go to Brett. What can we expect from you in the future?
Well, I think firstly you should expect I'll take a large cardboard cutout of Brett to the ceremony so that he's still present so we'll have the official photograph up on the stage with our certificate at least. Yes, exactly. Well, as we said, Tree Society we already plugged ourselves. Like, you see what we did there? You didn't even recognise that
we're here. So I mean, marketing is life. So here we are.
Okay. So yeah, Tree Society will be out at Gen Con. They'll have some copies, or at Essen. And for me, actually, I have this company, Postmark Games. We do print at home games, and very soon we're going to have a Kickstarter of a new Phil Walker Harding game from Joey Games, which is going to be about rescuing koalas. So stay tuned in July on Kickstarter. No, August. Sorry, it's already July for that. I think I've probably got other things, but I can't remember. Didn't prepare for the same shameless plugging, I'm afraid. You go, Brett.
Crikey. I mean,
You're not better at this than I am, are you?
No, I'm no better. Well, this is the problem, exactly. Being a marketer is a very different skill from being a game designer. I mean, a game that I was really pleased with that came out a couple of years ago was the team edition of Labyrinth, which I was asked by Ravensburger to work on over the pandemic, which was a kind of great pandemic project, because I was working it on my own, sat on my carpet, because it couldn't go out. And beyond that, there was a Labyrinth property, let's say, another game within the Labyrinth space, which was a game I pitched to Ravensburger many years ago, actually, which sat on their to-do shelf, I think, and they've plucked it off that shelf. I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be called, but it will be under the Labyrinth brand. It's going to be a smaller box, like a speed kind of game. And I'm actually really excited about that, because it sounds like they're going to do another beautiful job with the production. It's going to have really lovely dice and like little tiles and you place them onto a board to try and connect things. I mean, it's very simple, but I am a very simple person, and I like fast things, and I like shiny. I like fast things. I like shiny objects. So it's nice to have. I don't know. I think those kind of games are ones I will. When I see that, I was really pleased when Labyrinth turned up. I think they did such a good job with it. And Tree Society is a good example of a game that's spanned our entire kind of design career. And it is hard to be excited about a game after 10 years. Partly because you're a different person. You know what I mean? You're a different person. So it's nice to see new things or fresher things come through. And I think I have changed as a designer. Like the kind of things, the kind of games that I'm excited by has changed, of course. I mean, of course it has. So it's always the next one anyway. It is when you're good or when you're productive and you've put the hours in and you do have lots of games published, of course that's fantastic. But it is hard to be excited about the games after they're done. It's much more exciting to work on the new stuff. The process is what makes being a designer the fun part, I think. Waiting for a box to turn up. It's fantastic, and I should be more excited about it. But it has lost its edge slightly. The next thing is always the thing you're working. The new thing is always the thing you're most excited about. So.
This feels like the kind of Academy Award for a lifetime achievement or something, Brett.
Excellent. Well, Brett Gilbert, Matthew Dunstan, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you for having us.